Guys, I'm just about to go live here. Just seeing if looks like the microphone is working fine. So, yeah, let's just okay. We're we're gonna give this a go, guys. I wanted to go live today. It's finally nice enough out here that we can actually start doing some stuff outside. The ground is thawed and that. So today I want to walk you through basically how to go from start to finish, how to install a landscape lighting system. Now, it's not necessarily going to be in the field because it's we'll get that figured out, but it's just tough to record and do everything with that. But I'm going to kind of walk you through all the things you need and kind of the steps that you should probably take when you're going to install a landscape lighting system, and show you a couple different pointers and some tools and stuff like that that you can use. So the first thing, I'm not going to go through the lights and stuff and what kind of lights you guys can use. We have a whole ton of videos. Even the last couple live streams and stuff, I've basically done like consults where I'll show you, hey, this is probably some trees that you should use some uplights on. This is an area where you can use some hardscape lights or maybe some path and garden lights. There's lots of different things you can do. If you're stuck with that, which to be honest is probably the trickiest part of doing a landscape lighting job, just take advantage of our consultation. Email me a few pictures of your property, and then we'll kind of go through a design for you and help you decide what kind of lights and stuff. So I'm not going to go through that today. I kind of want to walk you through the steps of how you go and design your landscape lighting system. So the first thing is you go and you select your lights. So if you get the design consult, we say, okay, you're going to need 12 up lights, 8 path lights, whatever it might be. From there, now we can go figure out the rest of our materials. And that first step usually comes with, okay, how the heck are we going to power this system on? And that is with our transformer. Now, I've got a pretty basic transformer here, nothing fancy. I wanted to show you just why I would select this one or something similar for most is, one, whenever you can get a good stainless steel transformer instead of like those plastic shitty ones that you see in Home Depot and that, it weathers in the sun way better. It doesn't degrade nearly as quick. Those plastic ones usually 3 to 5 years, and you're probably having to replace it already. So that's why I like getting something that is that stainless steel that's going to last a little bit longer outside. Plus, these are a lot more heavy duty, and one of the big things with these ones is they usually come, and you might not be able to see the close up here. Yeah, either way, you can kind of see there's like 2 terminals on here. Some of them will have more, but usually there's a common terminal. And then there's a 15 volt, a 12 volt, a 14 volt, or whatever it is. So how you're going to go determine how big a transformer is going to be based on those number of lights. So what you want to do is you want to take all your lights. So say you've got a bunch of uplights, say they're each, and just for math purposes, I'm going to keep this super simple. Um, Say you've got 20 uplights and they're 5 watts each. So the bulbs inside of there each use 5 watts, and you'll usually know that if you're buying a light. When you're putting our kits together or whatever, it tells you 2 watt, 3 watt, 5 watt, 7 watt. Add all those up. So if I have 20 of them at 5 watts, that's 100 watts. So what I always want to make sure is when I'm going and selecting my transformer, I want to choose something that is at least 20% larger, maybe in some cases even like 30% larger. The reason being is because the lights, even though they might be 5 watt, they're still going to draw a little bit more power. They're not perfectly efficient, so they're going to draw a little bit more power than that. So they might actually be drawing 120 watts from your transformer. So that's why you want to make sure that it's a big enough transformer. Now, usually when you're getting one of these, if you're doing an LED system, you're going to find 150 watt and 300 watt transformers for the most part. I'll tell you, there's probably none of you that are watching this that need to go into a 600 or 900 watt transformer. They usually don't even sell or make those anymore. That was more important when you had a halogen system. Now with LED systems, you don't really need to worry about that. A common question I get asked about the transformers too is, am I going to hurt my system by getting a 300 watt transformer even though I only have 100 watts of lights? And again, the question is no. It's not going to affect it whatsoever. The only thing it's going to do is it's going to give you more room for expansion. Again, those were more concerns when you were dealing with halogen systems. That's what I love about LED lighting, it just makes it so simple to go and install your own system here. So sorry, I'm a one-man show here, so I just want to make sure that we still got volume and everything. If you guys are watching this and there's no sound, please let me know. But yeah, so that's how you select your transformer. Now, the other question I get a lot about transformers is about voltage drop. So, when you have a certain amount of lights on a run down the end of the line, you're going to start losing some of that voltage. And so voltage drop is a concern, but it was more a concern with halogen fixtures, because now with LED, the difference between a halogen and an LED fixture is halogen fixtures, the bulbs in there, they had to operate between a very certain voltage, usually between 11 and 12 volts, which means if you had a light way down the line, if it was a long ways away and it was only getting 9 volts, that light is barely going to flicker. Same thing, if it was too close to the transformer and you had like a larger one with a 15-volt tap, it's going to fry that light in no time. The nice thing with most of the LEDs and all the stuff that we use is that they have an operating range usually from 10 to 15 volts, which means there's a huge fluctuation or huge variety on what it takes to get those lights to work. So the reason I always like using a transformer like this, again, is if I have a 15-volt tap here, the nice thing is, in a general rule of thumb, is that if you're using a 15-volt tap and you have an LED system and you use 12-2 wire like I've got here, so this is 12-2 wire. There's there's kind of like two, they're stuck together, but there's kind of like two strands of stranded wire. So if you're using 12-2, you can typically put up to 100 watts of lights, so close to 20 lights, on a distance of almost 300 feet if you're using a 15 volt 15 volt tap transformer, which means because on that length you'll lose approximately 5 volts or so, which means you're still going to be getting 10 volts at that light, which will still operate your LED light. That's why I say it's not a very big concern, because not many of you are going to have 100 watts of lights on a single line that's 300 feet of cable. So basically, if you can fit all your lights on one spool of cable and it's under 100 watts, then you're fine. If you're going to have, say you have a bigger system where you have 40 lights and you have 20 lights in maybe the backyard and then maybe 20 in the front yard, well, you don't have to just do this big loop around the house. Usually you can fit 2 to 3 runs out of these, and in most cases these transformers have multiple taps, so you can actually have a run going that way, a run going that way, and then you just split up your lights so that you'd never have more than 100 watts on a full spool of 200 feet 250 feet of 12-2 wire, and then you're not really going to run into those voltage drop issues. So yeah, something super important, but it's super easy, guys. Add up your lights, whatever it adds up to, add 20%, go and pick your transformer. The last thing I'll say about the transformers is just kind of the timer options. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different options. You can have like a photo cell with a timer, which is a good, simple option if you don't want to have to piss around with anything and you just want lights coming, on and off with dawn and dusk. That's a good way to do it. And usually they just have like a plug or something like this. Different transformers have a different version, but you get that timer and it basically just plugs into here. And then this plug cable here will just plug into that timer. So they're really simple to use. Yeah, so photo cell, and then sometimes it has a timer option too, where you can have it come on at dusk and then maybe turn off 8 hours later or 6 hours later or whatever you want. So that's always an option. Another really good option that's super simple that you can do if you want to kind of run it a little bit more like from your phone or have more timer options. A lot of times what we'll do is we won't put a timer inside. We'll just basically turn on our transformer so it's on all the time. Whatever transformer you have, it usually has an always on function. And then all you do is you just plug your transformer into some kind of smart timer. So if you have a Ring system, you can get a Ring outdoor Wi-Fi plug. We use, you can find it on our website. We use one from Weon. We've just used it for a long time. It lasts a long time outside. I mean, just like any Wi-Fi stuff, there can be issues. So if you have a preferred smart home system, chances are they make an outdoor plug that you can plug in. You plug your transformer into that, and then you just operate everything from your phone. It's a super cheap way to make your transformer, you know, a Wi-Fi system. So yeah, so that might be something that you want to do as a really good timer option too. So yeah, that kind of covers the transformer. We've picked our lights. Really, the next thing is, and I'm not going to wire up the transformer yet. I will show you guys kind of how to do that. I want to kind of go more into the lights and stuff and how to wire those. I just want to double check that everything's still working here. If again, if you guys don't have sound or anything, it's hard to see. It looks like everything's working fine. So yeah, so now laying out your lights. So what especially if you're brand new, what I typically tell people to do is actually start wiring your lights from the transformer. That way you can, I usually do it the opposite. I usually go out in the field and I kind of start wiring backwards. But if you're new and you want to be able to kind of test some of that stuff out before you go, what I would highly recommend is go and actually wire up your transformer. So like I said, there's going to be two terminals. You're going to have your two cable of your 12-2 wire. I know a lot of you guys will go on YouTube and you'll argue that you have to worry about polarity, plus or minus, and all that kind of stuff. You don't. Like this wire, it's got some lighting on or kind of some writing on one side and not on the other. if you're engineer type and it bugs you, then keep it consistent throughout. I'm telling you, you don't need to worry about that. I've literally wired hundreds and hundreds of systems, and I've helped thousands of people wire systems, and it's never something I've had to worry about. All you need to know is there's two wires, there's two holes, you're good to go. So most transformers will be something like this, where you're gonna have a couple lugs or screws in there that you just need to back off. Some of them will have like little tabs and stuff that you'll just have to lift up, put the wires in, and then snap them back down. Either works fine. The only thing is you just want to make sure that the wires are actually in there. So I usually give them a quick tug after the fact, just to make sure that they're not going to come out. But now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to turn anything on yet, but I'm going to go and actually wire that transformer. So I'm going to have one wire going into my 15-volt tap. I didn't loosen these off as much as I probably could have. I'm going to tighten that down. And again, you give it a little tug like that. Okay, it's not coming out. I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm going to put my other wire in my common tap. And again, if you're worried about it, you can follow, like if the wire with the writing is in the common tap and you want to keep that consistent throughout the whole line, you totally can. I'm telling you, you don't have to, but for all the engineer types, you can totally do that. So there, I've got that wired in. And now what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go start wiring my lights. So I usually recommend, especially if you're just starting out, go wire in 2 or 3 lights and then just go flick your transformer on. Obviously after it's plugged into the wall, and see if those lights work before you get too far along. If it shorts out right away after you turn it on, that probably means you did a connection wrong somewhere. That's why it's good to do it in sequence. And I've had lots of guys who worked for me before. That same thing. They don't always go test this, and then we turn the system on and boom, everything shorts out, and we got to go find now where that bad connection was, which can be a pain in the ass, where it's a lot easier to just do it as you go. But you'll find once you've done, you know, a half dozen lights or so, you're probably not going to have to worry about it anymore, and you can just keep moving forward. So yeah, so there we go. We're wired up to the transformer now. We're going to be ready to test them. I'm going to start running out my wire. Obviously I don't have a full field here, but I just kind of want to show you roughly what this looks like. We're just going to cut off our 12-2 wire here, and now we're gonna kind of run that out into the field. And I usually like to run all my wire out to all the lights, so I know approximately how much wire I need and how much I'm going to use. And then actually at the fixture, so let's say I'm going to just wire up 2 fixtures today. So say I've got my 2 fixtures. When I lay that wire on the ground, I usually try and like leave a little loop or something like this, so that when it comes time to go wire it in, I've got some extra wire. And you always want to leave extra wire around those lights anyway, because if you ever have an issue or anything like that, you want that extra wire to be able to kind of make those fixes or anything. A lot of times you'll see wire connectors that they kind of they just pierce and screw into the wire, and there's no, like, you don't have to cut the wire or anything, which, yeah, they're super quick. But anytime you're trying to pierce the wire, what ends up happening is that it's way more prone to corrosion and that connection just failing over time. Plus, now if there's no slack and you've just pierced into the wire, if you ever have an issue, it's a huge pain in the ass, because now there's no way for me to work around that. I have to go cut the wire in 2 spots, and now I'm basically adding 2 extra connections at every single fixture, which again is just, it's another possible point of failure. That's why you always want to leave that extra wire here. So okay, so let's kind of show you guys how to wire the lights. So here I've got just like an in-ground light that that I'm going to go wire. You'll notice on the fixtures, there's always, just like the 12-2, there's kind of like two strands of wire here. Again, there's no positive or negative. Like this one, I don't even think has any writing or anything, so you couldn't even tell. So if the manufacturers are making it without that being an issue, then why would you need to worry about it? You might find some brands, and usually those are, how do you want it? Like they're kind of like plug and play type kits, like I can't even remember the companies and stuff that make them, but it's usually because they're not running off AC power, they're running off DC, or it's some kind of color changing one. And so then in that case, yes, you have to worry about it. But with 95%, especially if it's not a plug and play and it's just like a good contractor grade light that you're picking and choosing all these different lights, you don't have to worry about that. But the gist of it is, you've got 2 wires coming off that light, and you're going to find they're usually smaller. They're usually either 18 gauge or 16 gauge. I usually just go split those off, and then just with a set of wire strippers like this, I'll take maybe an inch off the end of each, and then I just kind of twist those wires up, just so it's nice and kind of sturdy, so it's easier to go and fit into my connection. And then I've got my 12-2 wire. It's running out to the next set of lights. Well, I'm going to have to cut into that. So again, that's why I like leaving that loop, because now I can just cut into that. And I'm going to need both of these. So this is coming from my transformer. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just split that wire. And then I'm going to go, strip off maybe an inch or so. And then I'm going to twist those up as well. And then what I'm also going to do is, now I've got this wire, because this is continuous, it's going to go to my next fixture. And this is a good point too, is like whenever you're doing this, the easiest way to wire lights, there's a lot of guys who always ask about, hub methods and spoke and chain methods and all that kind of stuff. Again, when you were doing halogen systems, you really had to work with that, because you needed to know how much voltage was coming into that hub. And then you needed to know the distance to all the lights. And that's why they did a lot of that. In most cases, when you're doing LED like this, you don't necessarily have to worry about that, because that voltage drop is not as important. So usually the easiest way, sorry, is just a daisy chain, just to go from light to light to light. And that way too, usually you can tell where there's an issue or where there's an issue, because if 3 lights work from the transformer to that light and then everything doesn't work past it, well, it's either that last light is a bad connection or the next light. So it's easier, in my personal experience, it's way easier to find those faults if you do it that way. So yeah, so daisy chaining is kind of the easiest. And then sometimes you might have to branch off and like tee a line off to the distance or somewhere, and I'll kind of explain that in a second. But first, I'm just going to talk to you about wiring these lights. So I've stripped the ends off my wire that's going out to my next fixture, and now I've got this fixture. So I'm just going to quickly talk about a couple different, actually, you know what, guys, it's getting hot out. See if it still works. I got to drop a sweater here. Okay, so a couple different wiring connections for the fixtures, and there's all kinds out there. These are just kind of the main ones. There's all kinds of shrink wrap type ones that you can use, as well as some with like copper crimps and all that kind of stuff. They work great. They're just a little bit more time consuming. So for the average, do-it-yourself or homeowner, you're probably going to use something a little simpler. So here's a couple different versions that I'll show you guys. You've probably seen lots of the past videos using something like this. These are called BVS2 connectors. They work great because they have all the features we need for wiring lights. And if you do screw up and you close them, you can't open them up. You just need like a flat blade screwdriver, and you just pop it open. But basically, the reason that these are good and any of these connectors are good is because they're all gel filled and they're waterproof inside, which is super important. A lot of times those piercing connections don't have that. That's why you want to stay away from them. And then they also, like I just showed you there, they snap down and they help hold that wire in place. So that's something you want to have in all your connections: waterproofing and some kind of like mechanical mechanism that holds the wires tight. That being said, it's not a bad idea to zip tie those wires or tape those wires together after too. You're not electrical taping them to waterproof them, but all it does, it just gives it a little more strength, durability from being pulled apart. So again, whether you're using these or the other ones I'll talk about, the premise of doing the lights is pretty much the same. Um, you'll see on these ones, you've got two larger kind of ports in here that will hold your 12-2 wire. So one of your 12-2 wires going in, and then you've got one of your 12-2 wires that goes out to the field, and then you have a smaller hole that will fit your smaller fixture wire. You put those in, you clamp it down, and then you're good to go. So that's one kind of connection. The other one, these are very similar. They're almost identical. The only difference, and the reason we started using these more, is that as opposed to these ones, there's still 3 holes in there. But the nice thing is these 3 holes can all hold 12 gauge wire, whereas this one can't. This can only hold 2 12 gauge and 1 fixture wire, which is great if you're just wiring a fixture. But this is where if you need to make a T and go off somewhere else, well, then what you're going to have is you're going to have, a 12-2 wire coming in, another 12-2 wire that's going to your next fixture, and then you're going to have another 12-2 wire that tees off. You can't do that with those. These you can, but it's the same concept. These ones, you open them up, wires in, snap them tight. These ones, you just lift up these orange tabs, put the wires in, put those down, and then this is gel filled. It clamps over and it holds those wires tight. So that's kind of why I like these ones. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can do more with them. Another one are these DBRY connectors. These are really, really good too. I really like them. It's 2 parts. There's a tube that is completely filled with gel, and then you have just a simple moret. These morets work really well too for holding the wires together. So again, same thing, nothing changes. And you know what? I'll just wire this one for you because it's easy. These ones aren't as expensive as these ones, so I'm not gonna have to waste one. But yeah, I've got my 12-2 coming in. I've got my 12-2 going out. I'm gonna put those together, and then I've got one of my fixture wires. I'm gonna take that, and I'm gonna just kind of twist those together, and then I'm just gonna slap my moret on there. And usually that holds them pretty good. And then I've got my remaining wires. I've got my 12-2 coming in, my 12-2 going out, and then I've got my fixture wire. So I'm just gonna twist those. And that connection's made. So now these aren't done because that is not waterproof at all. But that's where these tubes are handy. I'm not gonna waste the gel because it's so messy here when you do this. But basically, you just push these morets all the way up into the tube, and then this part just snaps tight down on the wires. When you do that, there's very little to almost zero chance that those wires are going to get pulled out of there. But this is again, doesn't matter what connector you use. This is where usually after I'm done doing that, I'll just go kind of wrap the wires like this, so they're tight, and then I'll put a zip tie on them like so, and tie that nice and tight. And now that's even less chance that you're ever going to get these connections. So it's a little like, or pulled apart. So it's a little more work, but it will potentially save you some headaches down the road. It's never a bad idea. You don't have to do that. Like I said, most of these connectors will do pretty good on their own, but it's a good kind of fail safe. And then along the same lines, the cheapest, the quickest ones, because sometimes people don't want to spend $3, $4, $5 on a connection. Then you can just go get these. Just make sure they're big enough. These are I forget what they are. They're the size 12, but you'll know they're big enough that you can fit your 12-2 wires there. All they are is morettes that are gelled filled. So you can just do what I just did here, where you put your wires in and screw it tight, and it's fine. It's going to be, for the most part, it's going to be pretty waterproofed. I have seen them fail from time to time, but for the most part, they do pretty good. Two things you could do to help that. If you're using these, you absolutely have to use the zip ties, because these will not hold the wires that great from pulling apart. They will a little bit, but not great. So you absolutely have to use a zip tie. And something else you could do is, sometimes if you want to waterproof them a little bit more, what I'll do is I'll actually put like a plastic bag around it, and then I'll zip tie the bag at the bottom so that I know that no water's getting in. And that's going to help. It's not going to be fully sealed, because there's still a potential that some water could get in, but that's going to give it a little bit extra waterproofing. So those are really the different types of connections. Pretty simple. It kind of goes from, I would say, most expensive to a little less expensive to a little less expensive to the cheapest. But in my opinion, probably the best. These ones are pretty good. These ones are great, but they're very bulky, so sometimes hard to bury. And then these ones are cheap but super quick. And yeah, that's kind of the comparison. So that's basically how you guys wire a light. Now, like I said, if you have to tee into a line, I'll even show you guys real quick here. But let's say now we're going to have another line that's going out. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to splice the ends of that. And then I've got to go cut into my wire wherever I'm going to splice it, right? So I'm going to cut into that. I sure hope you guys can hear me and this is all still working. If not, please leave a message or something. But yeah, then here we go. We're going to splice the ends off that. You know what? To make it really simple, and I would probably never actually do this, but just so I don't have to waste a bunch more connectors. And again, it can be these. Let's pretend I'm using this kind of connector. So I've got my 12-2 wire coming from, my transformer. I've got my 12-2 wire that's going out into the rest of the field, probably to my next light. And then I've got my wire that we're going to tee off over there. We're going to put all three of those together. Again, I can't do this with this connector, right? So I have to use one of the others, but then I'm just going to go and I'm going to go and twist that moret on there till you can kind of feel it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Again, like I said, if you were to use one of these nano junction connectors like this, you can fit all three of these wires in it. So you can use these. You can also use these. You just got to really make sure if you're using something like this that you zip tie the heck out of it so they don't get pulled apart. And if you're using these, basically all you would do is you would just go slide these into the tubes after the fact. And then now you've got your wire coming from your transformer, your wire going out into the field to your next light, and then you've got that line that's teed off elsewhere. Yeah, and then the only other thing I wanted to discuss and talk to you guys about is, now, let's say I'm at my last fixture, because I always get this question is, well, how do I dead end the line? How do I stop the line once it's like if it's my last fixture, right? Do I cut the wire off? Do I tie them up or something like that? But you don't have to. The only thing that changes is, now say this is the end of my line and I've got my last fixture. How do I go wire that? Because a lot of times people, what they'll do is they think, oh, I can just go jam everything into one connector. But no, it's the same premise. The only difference is you're going to have one less set of 12-2 wires. So we're going to strip the end of that wire, the 12-2 wire, just like we did. And then we've got our fixture that's got the two smaller wires. So the only difference from when we connected this fixture, we had 12-2 coming in, fixture wire coming in, and 12-2 going out. In this case, on our last one, We don't have that. There's no more wires going out. So how we wire that is the same thing. We're just going to go wire our 12-2 to our fixture. And again, I'm just using these connectors to show you guys. But if we do this, we don't have to dead end nothing because there's no extra wire. So you're still going to have two connectors at the end of the line. The only difference is there's no wire going out anywhere else in the field. So basically, in essence, it just ends with this last light. The only time you might have to like dead end it or something is if, like, say you were expanding and you wanted to just run some extra wire out somewhere. Well, then you would put that other 12-2 wire in here, you would run it out. And then at the end of that line, what I would do is I would just separate it like this, and I would just throw a couple waterproof connectors on the very end. And then that would completely dead end the line. So, and again, if I was brand new and I was just learning how to do this, I just wired two lights. The transformer here is not plugged in, but what I would do, I'd run back to the transformer, I'd flick it in the on position, and I would make sure that these lights are on. If nothing comes on, well, then I screwed up a connection. Maybe there's a loose connection somewhere. If it shorts out right away and the transformer trips, like it goes on and then it just trips, that means you probably somewhere put the wrong wires in, and it usually just means that you stuffed them all into the wrong connection or something like that. But it's usually typically pretty easy to figure out because, again, wire coming from the transformer, wire going out, and then you have your fixture wire that comes in. You do that twice for every single fixture. So you need two of those connectors for every single fixture. So that is wiring in a nutshell. That is transformers in a nutshell. Basically, once you've done that, you've wired everything, you've tested it. The only thing you need to go do now is, and I usually recommend this to people too, is like before you bury anything, come back that first night, turn on the transformer, and just kind of walk around and step and see how everything looks. You're probably going to want to make some adjustments. Like, all the lights have a bunch of different adjustment options and stuff. Usually all the lights have anywhere from a 4 to 10 foot lead wire. So sometimes, moving a light here or here or here can make all the difference on how things look. So it's always good to go and play with that a little bit. Once you've got everything wired in that first night, once you're happy, then you can go and you can bury everything. One other tool, and I've talked about this in previous videos. You know what? I'm just gonna cut this so I can show you guys. Okay, but say I've got my light now, and I want to go. I don't know how many lights I'm going to use. I don't know what it's going to look like, so I kind of want to test it out. Well, we've got these battery packs. So it's very simple. It's these little battery packs. They take 8 AA batteries, and they have these little alligator clips on them. And what you can do, sometimes you can find them, they have like on-off switches, which is super handy, but sometimes they're harder to find. But basically, you just tie or clip these alligator clips onto the fixture, and then what you can do is, especially if you have a stake, you can actually go stake this in the ground in a couple spots around the yard to kind of see how things look, to help you determine how many lights you need. I still use this. Like, if I go to a new project, um, a lot of times I'll go the night before and I'll kind of walk around with a couple of these and place a few, so I can kind of make sure there's no big dark gaps, or maybe I need a brighter light on this area. It's a really cool tool. If you're a contractor and you are getting into landscape lighting, or you kind of want to up your game, I would go buy a half a dozen of these and a half a dozen uplights and go use them as kind of demo kits for people so they can see. Sometimes the price tag that comes with lighting can be a little bit steep, but often if people can see what it looks like ahead of time, they're more likely, so much more likely, to go ahead with the project, because they kind of see how it looks. And for husbands out there, go buy one of these for sure, because I can't even tell you how many times I've had guys come back and say, well, my wife wants to see how it looks before I go spend $2,000-3,000. This is a really simple way, and I guarantee you, I don't think I've ever had a guy come back where his wife said it looked like crap and they didn't want to do it. It's always the opposite. And usually the wives say, oh, you know what, we should add more lights. 90% of the time, that's what happens. So it's a really cool tool. Yeah, a couple tips when burying the wire. This is a handy, it's just a little just a little garden shovel. I love using this for just kind of digging in my lights, because all the light fixtures, they usually have about a 8 to 10 inch ground stake on them if it's a good one. And this is nice just to kind of go dig a bit of a hole so that I can get that ground stake in. I usually have a rubber mallet that I'll hammer that ground stake into the ground so it gets nice and hard. But this works really good for that. And then when you're burying the wire, I use a shovel, I mean a longer one, but it's basically just a flat-ended spade, so that I can just kind of stab it and step it in the ground, and then I just kind of teeter it back and forth. And really all I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to split the sod, 6 to 8 inches deep, and then I can just go and, because the wire is not very it's not very thick, right? And then I can just go and push that wire in the ground, and then you just step on that ground after, and you won't even know you were there. Another really cool tool is this. For the longest time, I didn't know what the heck it was. It's basically just a weed puller tool. You can get it at Home Depot. It's kind of a long shaft with kind of this Y-shaped thing here. The nice thing is this isn't super sharp. So when you do that cut with the sod, it's really easy to just push the wire down. So there's really not much disruption. And if you're burying wire in a mulch bed, you can bury it a bit in the ground. I usually don't go as deep. Like I'll usually make my cut, only a couple inches into the dirt. So I just pull back the mulch, make my kind of make my cut into a little bit of the dirt. If there's landscape fabric and stuff, that's a bit more of a pain in the ass. So usually what I'll do, if that's the case, I'll just go pull back my mulch. I always try and run the wire along an edge, so it's not just right in the middle, so that if I accidentally decide to go plant a flower there, I'm going to cut into that wire. If you run it along the edge, there's less chance that you're going to cut that. And whether that's along a sidewalk, whether that's along a garden bed, it doesn't matter. Always try and run the wire as much as possible around the edges. So one, you know where it is, and two, you're just less likely to accidentally go and stab it. But if I'm doing it in mulch, if I go pull that back and there's fabric, then I'll just use landscape stakes, the same stuff you'd use to hammer down landscape fabric. And what I'll do is, not everywhere, but I'll go put that wire down, and then I'll just staple these, maybe every 2 feet or 3 feet, depending how far it is. And then that way it's not going to come up, because if in a mulch bed, especially if you don't do something like that, what happens is over time the wire is usually going to get pulled up above that mulch, and it looks like shit. And I see that all the time. So landscape stakes is a really good tool for that. Yeah, and I mean, after you've got the wire buried, you're pretty much good to go. There's not much else. So it's figuring out what lights you're going to use. Email me some pictures. I'll help you with that in the consultation phase. Kind of putting a package together, how many lights you need, so that you can go figure out what size transformer, how much wire you need, how many wiring connections. Then you just go start wiring your lights, test everything out before you make anything permanent, bury the wire, and you've got a really good professional low voltage landscape lighting system. So I hope that helped today, guys. I really hope this video worked, because my throat is sore from talking. And yeah, we'll keep doing these live streams. We'll eventually we'll start doing some stuff in the earth. It's still pretty wet and even frozen in some areas. I know some of you guys can't believe that, but we're up in northern Alberta, Canada, so there is still lots of frozen areas in the shaded spots, so we can't quite get to yet. But that's coming soon. We'll do more of these. If you guys have questions, please leave them in the comments, email, and we'll see you on the next one. Come on.